a lot of it was turnover more than, and he used to spend wildly. It was always, because he'd been away a while, I think he'd been away for 4 years, he had this thing of always trying to make up for lost time, which I think a lot of people inside do. It's kind of, you've been away, well, you've missed a lot of your prime. So he had this thing of trying to get big very quick. He always had a bit of an edge in terms of contacts, and he had the other edge in terms of that he could make money really well.
And what they would do, they would watch out with their binoculars and they would watch for the people loading the car up.
And it was very big scale, but that was the way the old man was. He was always big scale in everything he did.
Jace, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, thanks. You good?
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. How's life in the author world treating you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Going strong, staying visible, and doing lots of things like this, and yeah, going great. Enjoying it.
Was The Old Man and Me your first book?
Yeah, of that form. I did some graphic novels about 10 years ago. They were about drug smuggling. So we did those for a while, but this is the first one where I've actually been at the typewriter writing away like tradition. So yeah, this is my first of this type.
Well, congratulations, mate, because it's no easy thing writing a book. It takes an awful lot of I mean, anyone can do it, but most people don't, do they? Most people are in the category of, oh, I'm going to write a book, and you immediately think, no, you're not, because if you were, you'd already be putting the words down on the page. So yeah, massive congratulations. It's quite exciting, is it not?
Yeah, it is. It's exciting doing the book. It's that long slog, and then after you've done the book, you realise there's so much more to do because you've got to get it out there. So it's a different lot of skills. So and that's just getting accustomed to it, really. But you just try and enjoy it because it doesn't come along very often.
Did you have to try and anonymize people and not drop people in the shit?
I mean, that was a kind of a dimension in itself because when I was first writing the book, you're writing it for yourself, and it's only later you start thinking, actually, this could get published. In which case, should I be mentioning this person, and this person, and how would they feel about it? And should I ask them, or because you can't really practically go asking people because they're going to want to read what you've wrote, and that's no way to go on. So there was some I thought I can put the names down, they're fine. There's some I thought might be a bit, and there's quite a few where I think, well, what do you gain by putting the name in it? Because during the story, everyone uses code names, really, and that is the way you go. Everything's on the phone. So often you're dealing with people, you might eventually know their real name, but often it's all code names. So I kept a lot of people as their aliases. So there's only about 2 people I thought I'm not going to put them in because 1, I've got no contact with them. 2, they've got a bit of a temper, I suppose. And 3, they might have a few things coming about that I don't want to create many problems. So that's the way I judged it. And as the feedback, as the books come out, that's turned out to be correct because the books come out, I've been in touch with lots of people, and I seem to have judged it correctly. So yeah, that was good. But it is part of that process of you kind of write the book and then you're wondering how is it going to be received with certain people. Some people are delighted to be mentioned in the book, and there's a few on the eve of publishing. They were like, well, why are you giving me an alias? Can't you put my real name in? And there was a few people like that. So you just don't know. You can't read people. But the last thing you want to do is start showing your book to people and saying, do you approve of this? Because that's no way to write a book, really. You've got to put it out and just make your own call on things.
Yeah, if you put power in people's hands, then they can start to get a bit manipulative, can't they? And it starts to become their book rather than yours. Yeah,
and also all the characters in the book, including myself, are kind of flawed. So you're not just saying good things about people. There's the good and the bad. In order for the people to be 3-dimensional, you've got to do that. So there's also that. I mean, there's like Raj Kumar, who's in the book. He was a prison governor, highly educated, loads of virtues and that. But he got caught a lot of the time. He was a terrible villain. And you couldn't really put that to him because he'd be saying, well, don't put that in. I like that bit. And so you can't really do that. It's not practical. You put it out and then hopefully he looks at it and says, yeah, fair enough. I'm not the most perfect person, but then Jason isn't the most perfect either, because I'm pretty flawed in the book as well.
Yeah, when I wrote my first memoir, Eat and Smoke, about my time in Hong Kong, it never occurred to me that I would come across these people ever again, because it was 15 years ago in my life, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Facebook come around, and suddenly I'm getting messages. I just seen you in an interview. Do you remember me? And I'm like, I don't just remember you. You're in the book. You're that character.
Yeah.
And so I was quite glad that I gave everybody pseudonyms.
And that's the other thing with social media, because even my close family, it was, well, I can put their names in, but then you think social media some people just like, checking people out, just locating them and digging. And so I had to change my wife's name, my daughter's name. They're nothing to do with crime, but it's just create a bit of distance, really. The people who are involved, they all know who's who if they've got good memories. But social media is another element you have to contend with now.
So, Jace, let's talk about your story then. So, I mean, it's your podcast, so feel free to kick it off how you want. But I mean, a question in my mind is what is your sort of first memories of your dad?
I mean, going back, it was just out as a family, going out for a picnic sort of thing. And we were just, earliest memory, we were just kind of this happy little unit, like most families. And your dad's your dad. That's all he is to you at that age. And then it's only later there were things there that later you'll look back on and say, well, that was a bit different, wasn't it? And there's certain characteristics. But for many years, my dad was a Coventry businessman. For those out there, his name was Tony Spencer. It was only later he'd be called the Old Man. So his name was Tony Spencer. He was a very good businessman. Did cooker businesses and furniture shops, and very prolific in his 20s, made a lot of money. But he was also a Coventry villain, as I'd later learn. He was involved in a lot of things, knew all the top people in our city, but then he knew a lot of the top people in the other cities, which was quite unusual back then. Most people stuck to their own territory. Well, he was very good at networking, and he had a few periods in prison. And if you go to prison, you meet all these people from all around the country. So he always had a bit of an edge in terms of contacts, and he had the other edge in terms of that he could make money really well. And he was very charming and gregarious and everything. So we had all these little things that meant he become this notorious Coventry villain who occasionally was away. My earliest memory of him being away is when we used to go to Lay Hill Prison when I was about 6 or 7. And we used to go there, and again, we were still this little happy family unit. And we'd go and visit him there, and we'd take a picnic and go sit at the table. It was a Cat C prison, and we'd just have great days out there. But he would always sit at the table, couldn't move, but he'd give you undivided attention, which is what you get on prison visits. If anyone goes along, it's one of the few times, like now when we're talking, it's just me and you talking. But it's very rare. You don't really do that. Even at the pub, you've got drink. You're very sober-headed, clear-headed. You're both engaging. And you do that on the prison visits. And the prison visits are very intimate, and you really get to know people then. And that's really when I got to know him. And you saw this idealistic guy who just had loads of energy and was so confident. And at that time, when he was going to come out, he had all these business ideas, and he was studying. Back then, all the prisoners used to study the best ones. And that's what he did. It was all about self-improvement. And when he gets out, he's going to change his name and all this sort of thing. And he had these businesses he was going to do. And sure enough, when he came out, that's exactly what he did. He set up a cooker company, become a national company, and it was like tens of thousands every week coming quite quick. And he'd become this millionaire he'd always wanted to be. Except a lot of it was turnover more than, and he used to spend wildly. It was always, because he'd been away a while. I think he'd been away for 4 years. He had this thing of always trying to make up for lost time, which I think a lot of people inside do. It's kind of, you've been away, well, you've missed a lot of your prime. So he had this thing of trying to get big very quick. So within the year, he had all these businesses everywhere, didn't build slowly, and he was just constantly expanding. That was his way, always expand. He was never sitting still, never consolidating. And that's what he did for the next few years as I got to know him. And me and my brother would go to work with him on Saturdays. And there'd be all these guys visiting him and calling by for advice. And we'd go out in the car with him and meet people in pubs and on car parks. And there's little things you read into all this later. But sure enough, he's still a city villain, but he's mostly a businessman. He's straight. And later on, when I did the book, I'd visit and meet one of the guys from CID. He was an old mate of my dad's. He was a straight copper, but they'd become mates after he left the force. And he used to visit my dad, and he used to say to him, "You need to knock all this villainy on the head because you've got it made now. You've got this gold mine. You need to just sit back and just coin it in, and just stop associating with all these other people who you don't need anymore." But there's human nature, and I think for my dad, it was business day to day was quite dull. It was great expanding and building, but if you weren't expanding and building, it wasn't that exciting. And I think that's where he was at. And so villainy was always something he wouldn't leave behind. And he was always dabbling, which meant he always had these close friends, and he was always zipping off to here, there, and everywhere, down to London and Glasgow and all this sort of thing. And so later, this business empire he builds starts to implode a little bit. He has financial problems. Largely down to him over expanding. This is the early 80s when everyone's after a job, most people on the dole and all this sort of thing. So when he starts to implode, he starts to go back to doing post office robberies, and eventually he gets caught doing a bank robbery. And for that, he'll get 10 years. And at that time, I'm 11. And that's when I discover, well, he's this big city villain. And didn't you know those days when you used to go Leyhill, that Leyhill's an actual prison, and he got done for this. So it's then I start to realise there's a lot more to him than what I originally thought.
Was he, Jace, was he a loving dad? Did he knock out the hugs and stuff?
No, I mean, it was kind of old school when parents didn't do that. They were they'd give you attention, and if you're in front of him, you're really important. He was always very focused on what's in front of him. He used to have so much going on. But he wasn't the dad, I love you, son, and all that. I didn't know any father who was like that back in those days. It was all very, very British and stiff upper lip, very stoic. And he used to underplay virtually everything. So when he got done for the bank robbery, it was no big deal. He'd underplay that. And some of the details, he was quite dismissive because it was an armed robbery with shotguns and that. But he just saw it as, well, that's how you rob a bank sort of thing. It wasn't, he didn't really consider the staff or anything or that sort of thing. It was just, everything was very understated in his world. So later when he discovered things, like gun running and all this sort of thing, and lorry heists and post office robberies, they were just things he did. He didn't consider them to be a big deal or anything. They were things you kept your mouth shut about anyway, because that was just the way it was then. But he would always be very understated. And later on, when he went into the drug smuggling, again, it was the same thing. And I suppose I became a bit like that as well, and you'll see that in the book, everything's understated. There's not really any exaggeration there. And I think that's just the nature and part and parcel of kind of being in his world and being his son, I suppose.
Yeah, I do. I think we can go through phases of being a sociopath in our life. I say sociopath, not psychopath, as in like we're, basically deranged and nothing's ever going to fix us. But we can put ourselves in a mind frame where it's like, fuck other people, right? I'm going to go and take like what's mine.
Yeah.
And like I say, that's why we can have reform criminals, because it's sociopathy. It's a period in your life rather than like you're born a bit mental, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the environment as well and the justifications you have. For him, he was around a lot of people who did that sort of thing. And I think to be high up in the hierarchy, you had to be able to do things like that. But also, he's very good at switching his emotions off, which was kind of central to that. But I think it was quite normal for him to do things like that. And he used to see it as it's like a calculated thing where you're taking a certain risk for a certain reward. And if you're willing to put yourself out there, then you deserve the reward. I suppose there's a sense of entitlement in doing that. But it wasn't nothing cowardly about it. You had to put yourself on the line. And I think that's why there was a lot of respect for people who did that, even if you didn't agree with it. But you say you do have to have that sort of mindset where you'll go absolute focused and disregard other people. And I think that's part of being a criminal, I suppose. When there's hard times, you have to step up. You can just ignore all this and just say, I need to do that, and that's what's going to be done. And I think he was very good at doing that.
Is your dad still alive?
He passed away in 2015, and that's part of the reason I was able to write the book, because if he'd been alive, I couldn't have wrote the book. He wouldn't have had it. He would have been very against it. But as he's passed, he would be. I'd imagine he'd be very fine with it. We did the graphic novels on drug smuggling. He was so supportive on that, which surprised me. But they had this side of his character of he liked to get one over on the authorities, the police, and that, and doing things like books or them knowing what he'd done but not being able to get him. He did like that. And later, when he got involved in drug conspiracies, it runs through everything. He did some quite remarkable things, and a lot of them there was no profit in it, but it was a case of he wanted them to know, look, I did this, I got away with it, you can't touch me. And a few other villains are like that. I don't like Kenny Noyle and Curtis Warren. There's little vignettes of them, lording it over the authorities. And my dad was very much like that. And I think he had that from a very early age, I think.
Is Ken Noy out now? I think he is, isn't he?
He is out. He looks quite fit because I think when they're all inside, they're all down the gym, aren't they? So I think he must be pushing 70, but he looks very fit. And Curtis Warren's out, and he's as fit as can be. But they all go down the gym when they're inside, especially if they've got the release date coming. And that's the only time my dad went to the gym is when he was inside. He was just getting ready for your release. You want to be at your absolute best. And it's just a way of life. And then once he's out, I'd never go to the gym ever. It was just same with books. He'd read, every day he'd be reading and absorbing. But when he was out, he never read anything. And I think it was just two different modes. You get back to what you said earlier about that switching off certain things. And when he was inside, he could be very focused on what he had to do inside. And when he was out, he would just switch. And again, it seemed to be a bit of a skill he had.
I read somewhere, or I saw somewhere, Kenny Noy was a Freemason.
The Freemasons, I suppose, there's a lot of politics going on there. He wouldn't be the first.
Yeah, I was just surprised because I always thought the Freemasons were really hot on blackballing criminals, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like basically you're not allowed in, but
I think they're a lot more broader. I think my dad's brother, he was in the Freemasons and he was a villain, but you wouldn't know it. He kind of had this style about him where he was a proper English gent, but he was as much a villain as my dad. He just wasn't so hands-on. But I think maybe they've just turned a blind eye now and then. But for Kenny Noy, it seemed a very smart thing to do. Coming back, I think it saved him a sentence or two, didn't it?
Well, they don't like to say this, do they? But quite possibly, yes. Yeah,
very smart thing.
So when did things start hotting up for you? You're talking about Amsterdam and smuggling and this kind of stuff. Well,
I suppose it's about 95, 96. Between 80 and 96, my daddy did have a 10-year stretch for armed robbery. And then following that, he'd have 11 years for counterfeit. So he wasn't out that long. For 13 or 15 years, he was away. So in 96, I'd be about 26 then. And he was kind of coming back. And I'd gone off and done other things. I was an animator for several years. And I did other things, ended up being a bit broke. My dad was coming back. I thought, I need the money. He's doing well, it seemed, doing cigarettes. I need to get to know him over again, like as an adult, really. See what he's about. Because for the previous 15 years, I'd heard so many rumours about him. It was there was all these things with gun running in the Irish and all these heists and things. It was hard to know what was true and what was fake. Because you get in the criminal area, you get a lot of rumours, you get a lot of bullshitters in those sort of circles. So I was going to find out what he was really like. Same for my brother as well, and my sister. So when he came out in 96, we all would start working for him, doing cigarettes, which turned out to be drugs, which it was amphetamine and cannabis. And that would be his business when he came out. And he'd build up slowly. He'd come out unlicensed, start getting supplies from Manchester and Liverpool, and then just start building up. So you're doing, I suppose, a key a week and then 10 keys and then 100. And he just built up and up and up. And he just built his business back up, except it was drugs rather than, in the old days, it was furniture and cookers. And now it was drugs. And this is how I got to know him over again. And for the previous 7 years, I've been, like I said, an animator. I wasn't in criminal circles. So I was a bit of a fish out of water. And I had to fit in with this new environment, which was just full of villains, really. A lot of them were old school villains, which was good. But then you had the new breed as well. And they're all over the country. Like I said, in the old days, my dad was national in what he did, but he was a bit more international now. So you had all these people coming over from Amsterdam to meet him because he couldn't travel at the time, an island and that. So you get to meet all these different people who aren't from the art world. They're all villains of various forms. And so I get to learn what he's really about and how he works. And as I kind of get comfortable in this, I get to know him. He's very much a decent person, as I always thought he was. Except up close, there's a lot to admire. He's incredibly disciplined, incredibly focused, and he's just absolutely devoted to this work he does, which is, it's kind of drug smuggling, really. He's an importer, so a parcel comes in, and say there's a ton and a half the parcel, he might have 700 keys on the parcel, and then he'll take it, and within 24, 36 hours, he's distributed the lot. And then after that, you just round up the money, and it all comes in over like 7 to 14 days, really. And that's what his business was. And so I become part of that with my brother and my sister. And it was like a family business, which when I was a kid, that's always what I wanted to do with him was, but I thought it would be something legit. Except it did work like a business. It wasn't like what you see in films, where there's all violence everywhere and everyone's swearing and drawing attention to themselves. It's the absolute opposite of that. You work for him, everyone has to blend in. You can't stand out. So you can't be wearing designer clothes. You can't have tattoos. You can't have flash cars. You've got to melt. You've just got to be low profile, because that's what our professional criminals are. You don't stand out. You don't talk out of turn. You don't gossip or let your mouth run away on the weekends. He didn't like to have drivers who had drug habits. Cannabis he was okay with it, but coke he wouldn't. He wouldn't have drivers who did that, because he wanted people who were disciplined, efficient, and who you could trust. And so he built up this business with these kind of people. We all had very reliable but ordinary cars, and we all dressed kind of casually, which meant because you're going all around the country to different places, and you're not going into rough estates, you're meeting off the estates. So you meeting in places like McDonald's and services, places so you just got to blend in. And that's what most of the job was. It was blending in, staying disciplined, efficient, and being able to take a bit of stress now and then. Because occasionally a bit of stress would come up, but he would handle that. We'd be merely just part of the scene, I suppose. But for the most part, he kind of ran it like a business. And he would avoid fallouts because, as he explained to me, fallouts cost money. He says, there's that much money in this. The last thing you want to do is fall out with people, because someone who's a nobody can come at you. It's not like the old days where there's a strict hierarchy. Anyone fancies their chances now. So he says, you don't fall out with people, and you'd rather lose money than fall out, because the main thing is the business. You've just got to keep pushing that along. Mm. And that's what he kind of schooled me in. I ended up driving for him. In the early days, I'd do drop-offs and pickups, and he kind of schooled me in that. And then I started driving for him a great deal, because if you're his driver, you'd hear all the business deals going on. You'd have these 5 phones, for Amsterdam and Spain and UK. They're incoming and outcoming, so your phone calls are chopped in half. So if you have an intercept on one phone, they've only got part of the story. So they might know when you're leaving somewhere, but they wouldn't know when you're arriving. So it's things like that. So we'd have these 5 phones. So we'd always need a driver, and you need a driver he absolutely trusted. So family, you can't trust, families, you trust them more than anybody. So I'd end up driving him a great deal. And most of the time we'd have a fresh car, so you could talk in the car. And that's what we'd do all day. You kind of pick him up at 8 in the morning and then drop him off at a girlfriend's house about 11 o'clock. And he'd have these long business days. And it was pretty much meeting after meeting, darting around the country, meeting these people in cafes and on car parks and things, just like when I was a kid, except this time I was at the meetings. So you kind of see what was going on and how he was trading and how we just operated as a business. People are buying stuff, and if they pay cash up front, they get a lower price. If you want 7 days, the price goes up. If they're a bad payer and it's going to end up being 14 days, you charge them a bit more. And it's just like I said, a business with commodities. You almost forget what you're dealing with because you almost never see it. Because, the drivers who drop off are different from the drivers who pick up. So you got people dropping off the merchandise. then you've got people picking up the cash, but you don't really mix them. So if there's any sort of operation and they jump on you, they only get half of it. You get someone dropping stuff off, but they don't get the money, and vice versa. And that's kind of important, because later on, if people end up in court, there's a lot more mitigation if you're dropping something off and you've got no money, you're penniless. It looks a lot better. And if you're just picking up paperwork, money, then really they can't prove what it's for. So it's all like that. It's very organised, and it's all designed to just avoid prison sentences and hassle. So while I drove for him, a lot of it was him schooling me and me wanting to learn. I was a very keen student of learning everything you can, so you never have a problem. And that's, fingers crossed, for the most part, that's what happened. He never really steered me wrong on that. So that's how our days went. It kind of went weeks into months and then a couple of years. But inevitably, problems come on the horizon. It's unavoidable in the long term. But for a long period, it was just a business, really. You almost, like I said, you forgot what we were dealing in. And everyone was kind of did their things on the weekends, just like a normal job. You kind of work hard in the week. And at the weekend, you'd all relax a little bit and then regroup on the Monday. But I mean, the old man, he'd work through the weekend. He was the same all the time. He always worked 7 days a week. It was very rare he'd have a day off. So yeah, that was 96 to about 99, and that's probably when things start to change.
Yeah, you just reminded me. My buddy Simon, who's in I think he's in my second memoir, 40 Nights, folks. If you're watching on the podcast, you'll see it up there. And there's a knock at his door one night. I was around there. We were smoking a few joints, and there was a knock at the door. And this chap come in with a gear, and he was like really smart, dressed,
yeah,
very smartly. He had a sort of leather man's bag under his thing and then he dropped the stuff off, and I said to Simon, but you haven't paid him. He said, no, he said, that comes next. He says, you never have the money and the gear in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of the first things he taught me. You do the first drop off, you drop it off, and then you wait 10 minutes, and then they'll come back with the money. And in that period, you just kind of move and be casual and blend in. Like I said, you can't be standing out anywhere you go, really. So it's not like the films where, that everyone stands out in the films. In real life, you blend in, so you just go day to day and no one notices. But that money in the merchandise it's very effective, and it means you do things and people just don't notice. You drop stuff off, and especially dressed like the way you said, people just don't notice. They don't think about it. And that's the way it was always meant to be. I mean, I used to wear a suit a lot of the time, not with the tie, like a worker off, like a work in an office. I used to dress like that a great deal because it didn't draw attention. When you go through airports, you could look quite casual doing that. It's quite acceptable. But that was the way it always was. And if you ever caught on camera, you've got to look quite remarkable as well and unidentifiable. So you haven't got a brand name on you. You certainly haven't got a tattoo of any sort. No distinctive haircuts, or it was just the way you had to be. But it was the best way to be, the safest way.
Yeah, you mentioned cigarettes. I did a spell back in the late 90s. I was on a tobacco smuggling gang.
Yeah.
And we used to do these extreme runs to Belgium, which meant basically driving for the best part of 48 hours across to Belgium, pick up a load of tobacco at one of these cheap warehouses that they've got over there, fill up the car, drive it back through the Channel Tunnel, or obviously get on the Channel Tunnel train and come back, dump it at all a B&B in Dover, then get in the car and with no sleep, go back and do it all again. And if we weren't doing that, we would hop on the ferries.
So did you find the ferries more difficult than the tunnel?
Well, here's the thing. On the ferries, it was a slightly different gig. What you were doing was hitting the duty-free shop. And when you boarded your ferry and you got your ticket, everybody got a duty-free pass, right? that entitled you to go to the duty-free shop, get your 200 Bensons, and often the deal was like 200 Bensons and you get a bottle of whiskey or something. It was a long time ago. And so what you would do is you'd get on that ferry, and as soon as you're on there, you start running around the decks, just saying to people, excuse me, are you using your duty-free card? Most people are like, oh, do you mind if we have it? No. And so you collect like about 30 duty-free cards.
Yeah.
You'd go in the back then, what was it? Duty-free. Now it's tax-free. But anyway, you go in the duty-free shop. The guy in the till would be on the take. So he knew you'd been through 30 times, but every time you give him a quid. So, and that was a lot of money for the checkout person. Yeah. And it was an incredible experience, because when you were getting on like the minibus to go to board the ferry, so you'd park in the car park, you go a bit, you get a shuttle bus to the ship, or sometimes we did the hovercrafts, and you'd get what I can only describe as pretty feral, like Liverpudlians on board. Like these guys did not give a
like kamikaze fans. Yeah.
First thing they do, they get on that shuttle bus, spark up a big. They just did not give a hoot, right? So you got all of us running around the ship trying to get, and we'd walk off with like 10 bags in each hand, and it was fine. The customs just didn't give a shit, you just walk straight through. But what the Liverpudlian gangs would do is they'd put a lookout on the cliff with binoculars, and they'd be watching for people that were making this trip back and forward like we would, because you wouldn't just get one hovercraft. You'd get one. As soon as you got back, you get on the very next one that you so you go across to France like 10 times in a day or something. And what they would do, they would watch out with their binoculars, and they would watch for the people loading the car up and then getting back on the shuttle bus or back on the, back on the hovercraft or the ferry. And then while they were gone, they'd come down, just smash the window through and take everything from the.
Yeah, there's a smart mentality up there, isn't there?
Yeah, and it got really nasty up there. There was a particular B&B in Dover where these lads would stay, and people started to get stabbed and shot and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of an eye opener. I mean, people watching now probably don't realize you can get fake cigarettes, can't you? You can get ciggies that are like made in China or something, but they just put Marlboro on them, and you can't look at it. They're just baked brilliantly. You could make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah, I think at the time I think the sentences for cannabis and cigarettes were similar at one time, because Blair government, they dropped the caps on the cannabis, so a lot of people would switch. My dad says you may as well do cannabis, because the cigarettes is just as much risk if you got done with them. But all the small stuff they were letting go. But it's like when I come through customs, because I was flagged on the system, I get stopped virtually every time. So that's why I asked you about the tunnel. If I went on the tunnel, I wouldn't get stopped, because I think they didn't share information then. There was a bit of resentment between the two groups. But every time I was on that ferry, all these, the booze cruisers and the cigarette smugglers would go through, and there was me who was clean. I'd get stopped every time because I was always flagged. I'd gone over with the old man once, and they gave us a right hard time coming back. But ever since then, I was on the system, so I knew if I ever went on the ferry, I'd always get pulled. And they were quite vindictive. They'd just go through they were convinced I was somehow smuggling. They'd just tear the car to pieces. So when you say going through, it was so really easy. It was never easy for me on that. So when I'd come back, sometimes I think I'd take the tunnel and pay extra just to avoid the aggravation. But you never had any run-ins with the customs people.
Yeah, no, we got busted big time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were coming back with our, I don't know, probably I think our second load of the night. And as we drove off the off-ramp off the train,
yeah,
got to the top of it, and the customs car was there with its blue light flashing, and they were literally they'd obviously had a watch person at the warehouse, at the tobacco warehouse.
Oh yes,
writing down all the number plates.
Yeah.
And as we came up this off ramp, you could literally see the guy looking at his list and going, "You that way, right? You go home. You follow that. You know, you're going that way." And we got led by this customs car to this big, again, another like big sort of warehouse building. And as we drove into it, there was about 60 smuggling vehicles in there.
Oh, right.
Toyota minivans, everything. And luckily, that trip, we just took a shagged out old Ford Escort.
Because they take your van or take it.
Well, previously, we'd been taking my mates 30 grand, like Mercedes and BMWs and all this kind of stuff, right? And they took us in for an interrogation and basically said, "Right, fellas, it's like this. You can rock up in court and you can try and explain how you're going to smoke 5,000 packets of tobacco for yourself."
Try.
Right. And we tell you now, you're not going to win that. Or you can just leave everything and walk out the door. I know this sounds a bit slapstick, but no, it was exactly like that. They said you can
There's a chapter in the book where that happens to me, exactly what you said. And it's a case of you just have to leave the vehicle. You can take everything off the vehicle, but the vehicle will stay in. They wouldn't
let us take. I couldn't even take my actual duty frees. I bought a bottle of rum and I had 10 packs.
They have now. They did that to me. They took all my whiskey. It was because they give you a rap sheet, don't they? And you're supposed to check it. You go down, and none of my whiskey was on it. None of my own personal. But they all took that for themselves. But
they took everything. We literally walked out there. We had to find a bus stop to get a bus into the city, into London, to then get a bus back down to the southwest. And
it's kind of humbling, isn't it?
It's demoralising.
But you've got a bit of relief because it is a close one. So
yeah.
You lose the vehicle, but you fight another day, don't you?
It was just fascinating, to see how crime gangs work. I mean, we were. We weren't a crime. Well, I mean, we were a crime gang, but we weren't, big school. But when you see some of these, I never like to use the word Scouser because I think it sounds derogatory. But I always say,
it depends. I kind of see it as a bit of a compliment in a way because it's kind of insightful thinking, isn't it? And a bit of guts, and there's certain virtues in the name Scouser.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one
depends on your point of view.
Yeah, the virtue we saw up there in Kent was like they don't give a fuck. Literally just don't give a. And they would put so many vehicles through. They had factored in the ones that would get pulled. Yeah, they'd factored them in. I mean, looking back at it, the better way to do this was as when you rock up at the big tobacco warehouse is to change your license plate. Although that puts you in another illegal frame.
Yeah, probably a worse position,
But, you could change your license plate and then get 100 yards down the road, switch it back again. And then when you leave the Channel Tunnel, they wouldn't, your license wouldn't be on their list. But,
I'll tell you, when my dad used to talk about it, with all the others who were doing the tobacco smuggling, it was a case of you had to accept a certain amount of losses. It might be 1 in 10, say. But you're going to lose 1 in 10. You have to factor that in. But what you don't want is to have 2 losses on the trot, because that puts you in a bad position financially. But that can happen, and then you have to start wondering if there's a bit of a pattern and why there's a pattern. Are they targeting you, or is someone tipping them off, or you've upset somebody or something? But you have a certain amount of losses, but you just don't want them close to one another. And you certainly don't want to feel like someone's betraying you on the inside or you've rubbed someone up the wrong way. But I think they did that with the smuggling as well. It was always you're going to have a certain amount of losses. And it's just how you handle it and how other people handle it. But financially, it'd be very damaging. Yeah.
There was one chap who was smuggling gold back from Amsterdam, and he got away with it for quite a long time because he was putting these little ingots, in the headlight casing of his BMW or whatever it was. You know, you got the headlight, and then you got the little bicker on the back that covers all the electrics up. He was smuggling them in there, and when they pulled him, and they knew what this guy was doing, but they'd never been able to prove it. And when they pulled him off into that customs shed, like they do, I'm talking at the border, the actual border, you know, your passport place. One of the searchers happened to notice that he'd lost the bolt or the nut of one of the fixings, and he'd used a different one to and they just spotted that, and of course they pulled them off. There was all this gold behind it, and that was his.
I suppose they pull up all his previous trips, then, don't they?
Yes. So, Jace, I'm fascinated. So, I mean, tell us more. I mean, what kind of was this, like the ecstasy era? Was it around about that time?
A lot of people were doing that, you know, at the clubs. But my dad was very much, we'll do cannabis, the Spain, and we'll do amphetamine, the two lines, because he fancied himself as a bit of a chemist. So we'd do a lot of the mixing when it came over himself. So he stuck to those two lines, but it did mean a lot of the other groups didn't, which he would deal with and fix up and supply. But our group only dealt with those two lines. And one of the reasons was because they were Cat B at the time, or Cat C. So prison sentences you were looking at weren't that high. Because if you stepped up to Cat A, the risk was much higher. And also you're dealing with more ferocious people, because there's a lot of people into that who are dealing it, take the stuff as well. So you're dealing with more erratic people. But his reasoning was you deal with Cat B and C, it's a lot smoother. It runs like a business, and the surveillance operations are smaller, or they don't last as long. Sorry, clear my throat. But if you're dealing Cat A and they put a surveillance operation on you, it can be there for months. Whereas if you're doing cannabis or amphetamine, it's not going to stay on you as long. They'll come off, say nothing's happening, and they might hop on later. And he just made that calculation. This is the way to go, really. So that was his business model. He tried to stick to it. Some of the people who went into the Cat A, sure enough, they'd come down and they'd get done eventually. But when they got done, they got a big sentence. But when my old man got done, he got a lesser sentence, and he would come through it, or the threat of a lesser sentence. So that was his. The ecstasy, it used to deal with that occasionally. You know, if you had a customer who says, can you just get us that? It'd make exceptions. But the main two lines he'd try and stick to was the cannabis and the amphetamine. And I was okay with that, to be honest, because I kind of, cannabis, it's like music. Everyone smoked it at some point. And the amphetamine, it was fairly harmless the way I saw it at the time. So my conscience was quite clear. And I kind of saw us as a kind of as a business of bootleggers, I suppose. But, you know, for the 90s, we were doing bootlegging, which I imagine by now would be legalized and the government would be regulating it, which eventually probably will happen. But back then, I just saw us as bootleggers. We're doing a business. We're doing no one any harm. And it was very big scale. But that was the way the old man was. He was always big scale in everything he did. Whether it's a bank robbery or the dollar things he did years ago, that was big. But he always thought like that. It was always, why deal in 10 where you can do hundreds, and why do a delivery every month when you can do it every 10 days? It was always very, and that's why he worked such long days, because he was always very intense about what he did, and he wanted everything big scale. And but a case of what do you do with all this, the rewards from that? And he used to just reinvest everything. There was never any game plan for a big mansion or any grand lifestyle. He never seemed to be pursuing that. And that's part of the book, is to what was it really about? Because for him, it really seemed to be about the lifestyle. He absolutely enjoyed doing this. He'd have a smile on his face most days, and he liked the pressure. It's like a pressure that most people don't like. You know, when you've kind of, say you've got a load coming over and maybe it's been seized, and you've had people paying advance and they're screaming for their money back because they're panicking. Or you get a raid down the road and a group's gone down and everyone's panicking that the surveillance might be coming on. You get all sorts of scenarios. Or where some mid-level people have stolen off someone else, one of your customers, and they're also one of your customers. So there's all these situations that do come up, and then you start to get potential for violence and things coming up. Because you get some people who are quite straight, think as business people, think long term, and then you get people who are very short term. I want my money now. I want this. This isn't right, and effectively have tantrums about things, but kind of with essentially threatening people. They might be threatening you or your customers, or so that element does creep in at certain points. But the old man could always resolve it eventually until the day came when someone thought differently. Ooh, let me just have a supper.
Let me chuck a couple of questions in there then.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I just wanted to mention that my whole view on the whole substance thing is I think it all should just be legalized. You know, when you look at the massive amounts coming out of Colombia still through Mexico, it's just ridiculous to think that the agencies, the law agencies, can even make it and of course what we see is people that do fall foul of addiction, they're the ones that get punished.
They're also the ones that don't get help either, because it is illegal.
Yeah, and they don't get help. They get chucked in a slammer where really they need some proper rehabilitation. You know, some therapy.
But since the book comes out, I mean, I've spoke to a few police officers who've had the book or who have connections with the book, and they're of the same opinion. Retired officers, every one of them, they all say the government should regulate. It's a waste of police time.
Yeah,
and I think that's where we're at. Where it ought to be a medical thing, not a crime thing. You get your drugs off from someone with medical expertise rather than someone who's a villain. And I think because all it's doing is creating millionaires around every city in the country. That's all it's doing. Don't pay tax and are kind of pretty nasty if they don't get their way on certain things. So it's just a matter of when, I think. But firstly,
it's also all based on fear. You know, the average member of the public probably out there thinks, oh my God, if you legalize it, like everyone would go bang at it and they'd all be like, you know, and it's not like that, is it? It's, people going to do what they want to do. And just because you make something legal doesn't mean this whole swathe of society are going to go, oh, we'll all go and have a go at that. It's some people are not interested. And
there is that market for it, isn't there? The market doesn't change. It's just who supplies changes, but the market's the same.
Yeah, exactly. And the money, like you say, the money that could be saved on funding this ridiculous, they call it the war on drugs, don't they? That could be invested into actually supporting those people that do fall foul of it.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's a war on the supplies to a market, isn't it? And really, you just need to replace the suppliers with the government and essentially regulate it. And the criminals who want to be criminals can do something criminal that genuinely has some risk. But drug dealing, there's not a great deal of risk in it. And for a lot of people, if they're dealing with good people, it does run like a business. There's no benefit to society for it being like that.
Well, and the other thing as well, and I can say this hand on heart because I was I worked in a clinic for 2.5 years, supporting people who had drug problems. And the worst one, the one that ends up killing everybody, is the fucking alcohol. The crack and the heroin. Albeit that's not pleasant, eventually people get bored of that lifestyle, or they get it doesn't pay off. It's such a struggle to live that life, and people come through it, and off that experience, it can also be a very positive experience. I mean, how many people do you see that are putting out really good stuff in society that have had addiction issues? Hold my hand up here. I'll try and do my best, and of course, what the public would be really surprised, because we've all been brainwashed, is that alcohol's the worst one. It's the one that ends up killing fucking everybody because it's so socially acceptable. It's so easy to buy, and it's so easy to have a flask of vodka in your pocket and no one's going to question you. you can maintain that addiction, and it causes such relatively minimal interruption in your, because people make changes when life becomes too difficult. That's when people make changes, right? I'm doing this thing. Do you know what? It's not working anymore. This is no, bash your mind against the brick. I'm going to but the problem with alcohol is it doesn't give you that massive chaos in your life. It's just so bloody easy to do.
I mean, that's why the cigarettes and the alcohol are acceptable, because people, traditionally, you can work and take those stuff, and people can regulate them, have them on weekends. They're kind of acceptable. But the other drugs would become like that. But if you've got education with them as well, and you've got medical help, and they're better than what they're being supplied now, they shouldn't really disrupt society like what they say. There's always a minority of people who will have a problem with any sort of drug, but there'll be help for those people, which would be different.
Yeah, and the thing is so mankind is all mankind, ever since we lived in the caves, we've always done this stuff, right? Man has always looked for a way to change his mindset for a temporary period, going back to the shamans and the mushrooms and the whatever. And so the notion that you can have a war on this and stop mankind's natural instinct that's just ludicrous in itself. And clearly, and the other thing is, there's so much demand for substances now, and it's because essentially people are generally unhappy. They're looking for something exciting at the weekend, or da. This is why, America, it's the biggest consumer of the Colombian product on the planet, and yet it's supposed to be the most forward-thinking, biggest superpower. Well, clearly, there's a lot of people there that are unhappy going about their daily lives and not doing this stuff. Hence the demand, and all of this needs to be looked into. In
a different world, it would have been very different if it'd been legal 30 years ago. Then Mexico and Colombia and places would be more. They wouldn't have all these gang problems.
Yeah, exactly.
A product, and America maybe not have the problems it's had. Everyone would benefit, really. And
I went to Acapulco, Jace. Right, absolutely great time in Acapulco. As I was traveling in the Americas, and stopped off at Acapulco. One of my greatest experiences in my life is actually dived off the famous cliff there. Not from the top, folks, but just people have heard me talk about this before. Great. I met the cliff divers and they took me for a swim. It was just brilliant. But Acapulco used to be like a real playboy area for the Americans coming down who wanted a holiday. It was where the train robbers, Buster Edwards absconded to, didn't he? He went to Acapulco. Going Loco in Acapulco was the song that came off the Phil Collins film. And now that's not a luxury designer tourist destination. There's 50 drug gangs vying for power in Acapulco alone.
Yeah.
I watched one of my colleagues, Jason Fox, did a great film called The Real Narcos. And in the episode when he was in Acapulco, he's buddied up with this copper and they're interviewing this police forensic guy. The guy gets a call out. They had to go and retrieve, God, I don't even like saying this on a podcast, but they had to go and retrieve a corpse, and literally everything had been set, and it was just lying in the street in front of front of all the passers-by, right, where this drug gang had carried out their retribution. They'd done this. They say folks, if you're sensitive, cover your ears now. But they say they do this to them while they're alive. So they've taken a chainsaw to someone, and they've dumped the parts in the street. And again, people very naive. People just so naive. They don't realize this is just all part of a big. It's a part of the big scam, not the criminals, the bigger scam.
Maybe 10 years' time. The signs of change in the States, isn't there? It's changing their thinking. So,
well, who's buying into all these legal cannabis companies now? It's our MPs, isn't
yeah,
it? You know?
that's one of the problems. When you've got drugs rife at the top of society with the MPs, but even like barristers and things, it's everywhere. It makes no sense. The market is everywhere. It's not like run-down, deprived councils. It's everywhere, all around society. It reaches the point where you have to accept the market and manage the market, which is responsible, and legalise, and then the police can start doing proper police work again and get a bit more respect back. Because everyone's opposed to the police on drugs, and the police aren't really for these laws either. So we'll see. You can just hope on that anyway. But like I said, the violence does come into it when you get involved with gangs. It's inevitable at some point. It does kick in, and my dad found that eventually, and that's something that I kind of eventually come around to discussing, because I worked for him for that period. You have that period where it is like a business, but then later on, inevitably there's conflicts, and not everyone's pretty decent or thinks long term. There are some who kind of don't really have the ethics or see thieving off of the drug dealers as quite fair game. There's a lot of that goes on, and that's part of you'll see in the book in Amsterdam 2001. He has a problem there, and that's during a period where he goes off on the run. And
can we talk about that? Because
Amsterdam
is quite an exciting place for anyone that's been there anyway. Yeah. But if you've been there for the old dibble dabble, then it gets even more. I mean, I've had a couple of experiences there that really raised my eyebrows, you can say. What can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I first started going to Amsterdam with him when he was released, and his suppliers were over in Amsterdam. Every now and then, go over, see his suppliers, sort things out, and you can see Amsterdam was this liberal place, completely different to the UK. It's great things, but you realise underneath, well, it's a centre of crime really in Europe. You haven't got conspiracy law, so that's where all the villains used to meet. That's where they do the deals. That's where all the transport to the UK passed through. Bringing your drugs over. So it become a real thing. That's where all the money used to go to Amsterdam. Eventually, my dad, we get raided a few times, and there's a drugs trial. He gets found not guilty on a drugs trial, and then within 6 months of release, he's rebuilding this business, gets raided again, he goes on the run, ends up in Amsterdam, and at that end, he's doing supplying and smuggling, importing, that sort of thing. But he's based in Amsterdam, and there's a group there. They learn of a handover that's happening in the UK of like about just over 200 grand, about 220, 240 grand being handed over. And they find out through the drivers, because drivers come and go, and drivers, if they have an inkling of how things are done, they might kind of cooperate with another group and this is what happens. Another group learns of a handover, and they go and rob it. They rob 240 grand off a handover that I was supposed to be the main guy on, but I got pulled at the last minute because it was to do with some Irish people. So this guy who robbed it was a guy called David Royal from Bradford. It's a small group of quite a violent group. My dad never dealt with them. Some people he knew dealt with them. Anyway, my dad, we traced back who could have got this information out, realised where the information must have gone, and then this David Royal, he gets some notes at his home address saying, look, we know what you've done, we know what you've took, you're going to have to return it. And then he gets him on the phone and explains who he is. And then Royal does his homework and realises he's going to have to hand this money over. He's robbed it fair and square the way he sees it, but he's robbed it off the old man, and the old man's very well connected in terms of, like real top hierarchy. And he's demonstrated, look, we know where you live, we can come down any time and just take it, or we can stomp all over you. So, which my dad doesn't want to do. So this Royal arranges to return the money in Amsterdam. Except it goes on a few weeks. He doesn't. He should just hand it over, but every now and then it's like, well, we're not quite ready. It's not quite there, and it feels like there's something not quite right there. And of course, he's plotting. He's thinking, well, how can I keep the money and make this problem go away? And he's getting some gunmen over. And the idea is they're going to kidnap my dad and kill him. Is the idea. So my dad meets this guy Royal. He knows something's not quite right, so he takes a small little gun with him. They meet on the docklands of Amsterdam late at night, not too late, because you just don't do it like in the movies. It's just a normal time. So he meets him on the docklands, and then some guys with balaclavas emerge with guns and basically, get out the car. Yeah, well, you can imagine what's coming next. So my dad's stuck in a dilemma, and he just slowly moves out the car. And as he moves out the car, he pulls his gun, and they shoot him at point blank range in the chest. So, and in any sort of film, shot like that, you tend to go down. But in real life, he doesn't. He's took the bullet, but he's not going down. He's just really shook. But he carries on, pulls his gun, and starts firing at them. And he shoots two of them. He shoots one who goes down. One runs, escapes. And the main guy who set him up, this guy called David Royal, he shoots him in the chest. Royal does go down, and then he dies within a few minutes. And then my dad's got this. He's got this bullet in the chest, and he needs to get away. And he's still standing, and he staggers away, manages to get to a safe house a few streets away. And then he phones me, and then I go over. And then wait. By the time I get over there, like 12 hours later or something, it's late at night, and he's on a stretcher bed at his safe house. All his phones are gone, and we're just there in silence. And I'm there for 3 days waiting to see whether he's going to pull through. Because it's gone in the chest. You just don't know if he's going to go downhill or what's going to happen. And you've got to have all the phones off because there's a big panic. The Dutch are at the scene, and they'll be straight on the phones because the Dutch are very high tech. So we just stay there and wait for him to pull through, which he does gradually. But before he pulls through, rather than, when we first get there, he's in this real bad state. But he stops taking his meds, and he lies on this bed, and he tells us exactly the story of the shooting, which I put in the book, and he describes it in fine detail. And then he goes to sleep, and the following morning he just come around, and the improvement starts the next morning. And immediately he wants to see people. He wants people around to see that he's okay, because he doesn't want other villains thinking he's dead, and he doesn't want them thinking he's out of action or he's gone. He says he needs people to actually come around, see him, and get on with these deals, because he's going to have to get out of Holland, but he's got to make sure his reputation's solid. So that's what happens for the next day or two while he's lying on this sofa bed, with this all bandaged up and everything. He conducts all these meetings and wraps up all these deals, and all these Dutch people see he's good, and they all make these offers to sort out certain problems and wrap things up and get him out of the country. And that's what happens. And it's at that period, which is why the book starts like that, I start to wonder why he's doing all this for. Like I said to you earlier, because it doesn't seem to be about the money. It seems to be about this game that he likes, which is about making money, but it's also about this excitement. And situations like this don't occur very often. But he's had situations with guns before, I've learned, where people threatening you at point blank range, and people threatening. That's kind of part and parcel. He doesn't seem to have the normal fear any rational person would have. He seems to see these as problems to be managed. So that's part of the reason I wrote the book, is because of this. Is trying to figure out why he was the way he was, and why he loved this crime. Because up to that point, he must have spent 17 years in jail. He did this bank robbery and the counterfeit, and then he'd held a gun to a guy's head when he was in his early 20s. He got the 4 years for that. But you had it 17 years inside, and he absolutely enjoys it. He's got such an appetite for it. And this is why later I eventually wrote the book, because it was about me trying to understand why he was like that. And I suppose other criminals are like that, because some of them seem to do it for the money, and some of them seem to do it for the excitement. There seem to be two different breeds. And he was someone who just did it for the excitement. But why he needed that excitement in his life, it's a bit of a mystery.
How's it affected, Jace, how's it affected you then? Because you're being quite, you're sort of going along with this. I don't want to say blasé, but I mean, he's your dad, and he's setting this pretty crap example to you. And he dads are kids' heroes, aren't they?
Yeah. And he still stands with them, yeah.
He's putting you through some severe trauma. Did you? Is this something you had to work through in your life? I mean, did you hit the booze yourself?
No, I think it was so normalised with him. From when I was a kid, visiting him at Long Larton for the bank robbery. you kind of get used to the climate around him. And it's, I mean, around him, you never talk about emotions or how you feel or you're having a bad day. It's kind of because he's had worse days, and he never grumbled when he was inside. He never grumbled. When he got shot, he never grumbled. He just never complained about anything. So you do learn that complaining is something you don't do, and your emotions are things you keep to yourself. I mean, obviously, I would have had my emotional issues later, but I can't say I felt traumatized by any of this. It was kind of I adopted, I suppose, his way of thinking, which was this is kind of business, and this is business gone wrong, and it needs to be sorted out by doing X, Y, and Z. And X was letting people know he was fine, and Y was getting him out of the country, and Z was starting over again. So I kind of echoed him to a certain respect, largely because I thought he was expert on this and I wasn't. He really knew what he was doing, and he had a track record of being very good at it. But unfortunately, he would get caught simply because he did so much. He never really, retreated or said that's enough for a while. It was just against his nature, which is, like I said, something that really fascinated me as to why he would be like that.
What kind of any famous names you can chuck out that you hung around with back in the day, or you?
I mean, there was without mentioning the names because there's things still lingering. There was the Nottingham people. There's only a few you could conclude that was the Nottingham people. A guy in Leicester, Shokat Chenya. He was a good friend. I mean, when I met my wife, that was a double date with Shokat. And we went out and met my wife and everything, and my future wife. And he was a good friend, Shokat was. But then he'd get 20 years. Unfortunately, he was very arrogant. He ended up with bloody 20 years. And then he would become very humble. And my dad's barristers got him off. And then he came out, but then he come out again. And it was that thing of wanting to make up for lost time. He'd lost everything when he got his 20 years. He had a golf course, lost everything. And he wanted to build up very fast. But unfortunately, he wasn't with my dad then. He was like his guide earlier on. And he kind of employed a bit of violence, very aggressive, in order to build back up. And he'd end up getting murdered, he would. But that was national news. There was a driver. He'd given him a pistol whipping for, I think, losing some money or cheating him on something. And later on, that driver remembered this. And months later, when Ash thought things were good, he kind of, in the back of his prize Mercedes, he stabbed him like 16 times in the chest and then burnt his Mercedes and then did a runner. And then later he'd get caught, he'd go down for that. But that was the way Ash ended. And Ash was a good friend of my dad's. When I first started working for him, we'd see Ash virtually every day. And like I said, he'd come out nightclubs and stuff. He was, but he had a very bad end. But there's quite a few like that. That just that sides of the character that ended up being there and doing. They wouldn't let things go, or the money was too much. Whereas I used to see with my dad, rather than fall out with people, just let it go. Because there's plenty of money to be made, he'd always say. You just don't fall out with people. And Ash was an example of that. You fall out with people, people remember. And someone who's a nobody can kill somebody quite easily. And that was really Ash's tale. But there were others like that as well. But like I said, the Nottingham people, he had some dealings with the Liverpool people earlier on. Curtis Warren, he did a few dealings with him at the start when he just got released. So he had a lot of respect for him. Thought he was a genuine old school guy. And I think he's got like an impeccable reputation. That still stands. And he was released a few weeks back. And like I said, there was a few London people. A lot of the people he dealt with tended to be close, like in terms of geography. And one reason for that is it's like if you were a driver, if you were dropping some stuff off in, say, Leicester, you got paid the same as if you dropped it off in Glasgow, except you take, the time. So all the logistics would come in. So you try and deal close so you make more money. You really don't want to be dealing with Glasgow or Ireland or, all these long distances. So a lot of it would be like Birmingham and Nottingham and Leicester, and then they would distribute it further afield. But they were all the groups we dealt with, especially the Birmingham ones as well. But a lot of them are heavy duty that I don't throw the names around. The Nottingham one, my dad's, I think he's on the internet. He's got a lot of associations. So that's kind of matter of record. But the old London people, he knew a lot of the old London people from back in the day. But they didn't really get mixed up in the drugs so much. They were more bank robberies and that sort of thing back in the day. But he seemed to know all the top tier people. As I said to you, when there'd be disputes between one group and another group, whether they were customers of my dad's or They were just people who knew people he knew. They'd be in touch asking if he can resolve something. They had a problem in Newcastle, for instance. And he'd say, oh, yeah, I know them up there. I did time with so-and-so. And he'd sort it out for them, or in Manchester or Liverpool. And he had this great reach to sort out problems. And that's something he did because he spent so many years inside, and he used to network so much. He could just sort out things like that very easy, just with phone calls. So you'd have instances where someone in, say, Newcastle is falling out with someone in Manchester, and my dad could get in the middle and sort the situation out. So there'd be no violence or anything. You used to think that's a pretty good thing to be able to do. But he'd get a certain kudos for being able to do that. And people would see he could sort them things out and realise you just don't steal off him. So there was no threat. It was just an ability was demonstrated, I suppose. My dad used to say when he first got out, they might not be scared of him personally, but they'll be scared of the people he knows. And that's the thing that really stood. Because he virtually knew everybody. It was all top level people. And a lot of them, because he'd been inside with them. You say you're in solitary with them, or you're in the yard, or they're in the next cell, or on your wing. You get to know them really well. You know what the character's like. And you know if they stand up, and if they're true to the word, they're good business people. If they've got any like bad character flaws, you get to know them really well. And of all the people he was inside with, from them would emerge the good people, the people you could deal with year in, year out, never have a problem. And if you lost money with them, they would be fine with it. They'd be like, you owe me 50 grand, just pay it when you're out in 3-4 years. They'd be very laid back because they were good people. And that's where all his best contacts came from. So, yeah.
Before we go any further, I don't want to forget saying a big thank you to Nick, who put me in touch with you, Jason.
Yeah.
Nick's absolute legend. He's hooked up me with quite a few great podcasts. So Nick, much love to you, buddy.
Yeah,
and
Nick as well.
And thank you. Jason, the last thing I want to chat. Well, I've got two more things I want to chat about. We'll come on to movies or films.
Okay.
I've got a few sort of favourites in this area. What any experience of the old sort of Spanish thing? Costa del Crime.
Yeah, did a lot down there. Yeah, Spain was a big deal because he dealt with Holland and he dealt with Spain, and I always felt safer in Spain because Holland, it was high tech, loads of surveillance, undercovers, police everywhere. In Spain, it was always laid back, but Spain was where I ended up getting arrested because we got done by an undercover unit, which took me completely by surprise because we'd been in Britain, lots of surveillance, Holland, similar thing. No problems. And then Spain, where it's supposed to be laid back and it's hardly supposed to be any, that's where we got done. And we would come through it, but we were just dropping some money off. It was to buy a ship out there. He was buying a ship. It was like, I never actually saw this. Sometimes some people say it was a boat, others said it was a bloody ship. And it had all these smuggling compartments. And it was tried and tested for donkey's years. And the captain of it, he was retiring, the owner. So my dad was buying the ship, and I took the last bit of money over with a few other guys. And as we paid it over, the money was all handed over, deal done, everything. We came away off to some, trying to find a bar to have a drink and everything. Went to some retail complex. As soon as I got out of the car, we all got arrested. Undercover unit were on us within seconds. And they were the scruffiest bunch of gits you ever did see. And they were just come from absolutely nowhere. I was stunned. It was like, I've done everything I'd always learned to do, and I hadn't spotted them. And I was a bit, we bought them there, and then I realised they'd been on them for days. And they held us for like best part of the day in the cars while they searched this there warehouse my old man had. They were obviously searching for drugs or money. But the money had come and it had gone within minutes, and they didn't know that. It took them best part of the day to realise that. And we just sit there thinking, how long are you going to be in prison for? Can we wriggle out of this because we're in Spain? Can we bribe people? And are we all going to get to the same place? But that was bit of a turning point for me. But yeah, Spain was a happy place for me, Spain, apart from that. Because my dad was on the run in Spain for a number of years. And he was up at Barcelona, a place called Castelldefels, kind of a real, luxury area. And my days in Spain were often just driving my dad about, going to meetings and doing the same things we did in England, except I'd feel safer. And it was sunny and there was bars. But it was the same thing, long days of working. He'd be up at 6, out at 8, and then back at the place. Kind of early was the idea because he was on the run. in the UK, they launched this campaign, Public Enemy Number One. There was 5 of them, and my dad was the number 1 guy. And basically, because he hadn't turned up for a year or so, and they were still looking for him, they figured he was in Spain. So they led this campaign. And when they do things like that, it means you've got to cut down your circle of people you deal with because you're worried about getting grassed up. So my dad's circle of people he could work with went smaller and smaller, which is what happens when you're on the run. But it also means people can take a few liberties when you're on the run because you can't really have conflicts with people at all, simply because, once you're gone, they're not going to pay you. So people have a bit of an interest in you going down. So he was on the run for about 3 years in Spain, and then eventually he did get done. He got 7 years there, and then a lot of courtroom after that. But dealt with Spain a great deal.
I heard Danny Dyer runs things down there.
Oh, Danny Dyer, you do get people like that down there. I think my dad's people were like professional people, low profile, and we did have one Danny Dyer guy come in who was so loud, he scared the hell out of everybody. They were doing some boat work, and he had to put this guy in the next village because he drew that much attention. But you needed him because he was the skipper of the boat. Otherwise, you would have got rid of him. But we only had one skipper, so you had to keep him. And they had to put him in the next village and keep him happy because they were relying on him. But he fell out with virtually everybody because he had this movie idea of what a gangster was. But he drew so much attention. He'd go into a bar and want champagne and drinks for everybody. And you can't really do that in sleepy Spanish villages without people clocking it. But
I should give some credit to Danny there because I tell you what, he's one of my favourite actors, and I have to say it. When he went to EastEnders, I was a little bit like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, really?"
Yeah,
he's in one of my favourite films ever, The Business. Have you ever seen it with Tamar?
I have seen it. Yeah. Remember
Hassan.
All right, that one.
Yeah, and it was just, it's exciting stuff. You can see the glamour.
Yeah. I think the stuff that makes the movies is the ones you got to have in a movie. You got to have conflict, haven't you? You can't have. I mean, the guys who don't fall out and do it professionally, they wouldn't make good movies. You got to have the people who fall out, who don't get paid and around with shotguns, and the ones who are loud. And you've got to have, like same with the American movies, I guess. If the top guys wouldn't make great movies, but the middle guys who are always falling out, they make great movies, and I think that's what we get really. Yeah, that's I think that's pretty much every British movie going. It's about the middle guys, isn't it? The guys who aren't the big suppliers who deal with them.
I really enjoyed that film. Tamar Hassan, who played Charlie, was just absolutely brilliant. I think probably for me is the best, my favourite film that I've seen him in. And you had Jeff Bell, who played the psycho Sammy, who was the guy that would go on the armed robberies, and he would actually shoot people. And he's probably like every conservative criminal's nightmare.
So did you watch The Wire at all?
No, mate. I stopped kind of watching TV in that sense. Well, yeah, in 2001, if I was honest, or about 2005. But no, I didn't. Occasionally, like, I'll make exceptions. For example, I'll watch the Narcos series because I'm just fascinated in that stuff, Yeah. All the Mexican drug lords and Pablo Escobar and we talked about psychopaths earlier. I mean, Pablo Escobar, he wouldn't think nothing of blowing up a car outside a building when most of the people in the building had never done nothing to him, right?
Yeah.
With passers-by walking their kids and and it literally looked like the scene of a nuclear explosion after Pablo had finished, right? And all to take out like one person who'd gone against him. Or like to take down an airliner because there was one person on it and they just didn't give a shit about all the innocent people. And yet, when I think it was the Cali cartel bombed the flat that his wife and kids were in, they didn't get hurt. Well, I mean, they got superficial kind of. I think his daughter lost part of her hearing. Right, the guy goes absolutely like super pussy, like crying his eyes, just utterly beside himself with grief.
Psychopaths can be like that, can't they?
Yeah.
They can cry for themselves, but never for anybody else.
It's just incredible. Like, my God, dude, you can do all this stuff to complete strangers who've done nothing to you. But when anyone tries to get back at you, you literally cry like a girl. It was, sorry, girls, that was inappropriate. But you know what I'm saying,
Yeah. But it's the way, I mean, all the villains seem to have these contradictions. And it's never what you think it is. The guys who you think is an absolute psychopath, you realise he's got a real weak point, an Achilles heel. And that seems quite normal. And when I was with my dad, said it was amazing how, you don't go on appearances because they're very deceptive. But people who do seem to be like that, underneath, you realise there's something else going on as well. And it does seem to be always the way. But yeah, I mean, Escobar, it'd be nice if a good film was made from that sort of point of view about it, rather than one that glamorizes, but like a proper filmmaker.
Yeah,
it would be good to see that, to see the other side, because to do what he did, you've got to be a ruthless psychopath to do that.
Yeah, I think his son's doing a few podcasts now. He's changed his name, and he openly says, like, I'm nothing to do with my dad. Don't tar me with that brush. I was just an innocent, really. It was insanity what that family went through. Just on the run, and in order to keep warm, they're burning like $100,000 worth of dollars on the fire because they've got no firewood. Just in crazy stuff. But I
think all this stuff can look glamorous from a distance, but when you go close in, it's just not glamorous at all.
No, the
real intensity about it is not pleasant. It grinds away at you.
Yeah, it's all based in. A lot of it's based in ego. I talk a lot on my show about the spiritual battle, and if you're led by your ego, you're fucked. Your life is just not going to be fun. And that's a big thing. I mean, when you're in that circle, and everybody in it's probably been damaged from their own childhoods. They're probably angry young men to start, and they're living in their ego and like, no one disses me, and it's morals and scruples are a little bit like that. It's never going to end up well, is it? They're not all on their yoga mats, are they? Chanting and OKR and let's eat some spinach and everything will be good. It's a very different world, very different world where you do get this montage of psychopaths and sociopaths and damaged people and abused people and greedy people and innocence all woven in this tapestry, which is just never going to end well.
Yeah, like you said, the ends for a lot of the people. When I look back, I mean, I did mention that in the book. When I go through the cast of people, there's a disproportionate amount of people who are dead and inside and disappeared. And you just think, well, what did happen to them? There's a guy. Last words I heard, he was kidnapped in Gibraltar. Never found out what happened to him. It was, but there are people you do wonder about. What the hell happened there? But there's a lot of damaged people. A lot of people, even if they do their time, aren't the same when they come back. Very few are when they're released again. You can't really go back to who you were when you were younger. And if you do, you're kind of in that exceptional class, I suppose, where you do wonder why.
Well, there is that benefit. There is that expression, isn't it? Crime doesn't pay. And to anybody watching now, if you're going down that path, and we've all done it to a degree because it's appealing at certain times in your life.
Yeah.
But I'd say to anyone, if you got the brains to do a crime, you got the brains to do a business. And when you do a business, you don't have to look over your shoulder for the rest of your life, and you don't have to wake up in sales one day, which is just fucking awful. It's awful. There's no more time when you can't look yourself in the mirror because you ain't got a mirror in a police cell. But at that moment, you just think, oh my God, what have I done? I've lost my liberty. And that's the most important thing in life is freedom.
I mean, that's one of the ironic things. A lot of people are going, they do value freedom, the freedom to do whatever they want. But when you're inside, you can't do that. No. And you kind of lose that thing that you prize so much. The material things you lose that as well. Because a lot of the guys, once they've made so much, you would think common sense would say, like, your eyes common sense would be, well, stop now. You know, like a casino. Yeah. You're up. You may as well just leave the table now. But there's that ego thing of having to carry on, where you just can't let it alone.
Ego and greed, isn't it?
Yeah, and it brings down a lot of people. And also, if you go inside, you don't want to be someone who thinks, I can do the time. I don't mind losing my family. I don't mind this. You wouldn't want to be like that either. So either way, you lose, really.
On a sort of lighter note to finish, Jace, what have you got any favourite sort of gangster films or books in that area? Obviously, with the exception of yours and mine.
The Wire is probably the best series I've ever watched on organised crime, especially like the first series where it goes back to the 90s, which I know it's all about the phones and keeping a low profile, and you know it's all about that. That's probably the best series I've seen. Goodfellas is kind of it's like movie gangsters, but it's of a time, and that's a fantastic film. The Tarantino stuff's entertaining, but it's movies at the end of the day. You know, there's a movie. You get movies and films, I think, and movies are more entertainment. Films are more about reality, and I suppose Scorsese is a bit more reality with Goodfellas. But yeah, there's some of those American movies. Yeah, they're pretty special. The Scorsese ones. But The Wire would be the big recommendation, I think, because I still make people who haven't watched it.
I'll have a look out for that.
It's such a layered series, and it's so long. And it goes against all the cliches as well, all the things that you
is it based on real life? Or I mean, obviously it's loosely based on it, but is it any particular real life story, or is it
no, fiction? That's the thing about it. It's about a cast of stories where and they're all kind of interwoven. So it's got the drug addict at the bottom, but then it's got the drug supplier at the top. And then it's got the levels, the middlemen. And all that, like I said, how they all fall out. The fallouts tend to be with the middlemen, and all the people at the top try and be businessmen, or at least think they are. But it's a lot of ego as well. You see a lot of these guys with ego come down, and not a lot of people survive it either. But it's a fantastic series, and it keeps re-energizing itself. As soon as you think, well, I've got that, I know what the series is about, another layer emerges, and you think, Christ, and that's a whole new series. But I still meet people who have not watched it, and it's incredible to me you wouldn't watch that series.
Yeah, what about Nil by Mouth? Have you seen that one?
I don't think I've seen that, no.
Oh, mate.
I know it's a very famous movie.
Yes. Just one of the best films, I think, ever for understanding like the seedy underbelly of crime and drugs and addiction and how it all... The most important thing I took from that film is what we're here to talk about today is the relationship of a father and a son and how powerful it is.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Nil by Mouth, folks. If you haven't seen it, try and grab yourself a copy, whichever way you do that these days. I don't know. I try not to have to buy anything, but Ray Winston, just another classic Ray Winston. Kathy Burke is just brilliant in it. Charlie Creed Miles, who's done a lot of these sort of gangster sort of stuff. Really. I do like films that explore the family relationship, because nothing's what it seems, is it? You know.
Yeah, I think a lot of films do have that focus where it's just on the gangsters and not what's around them, which is where the interest is, really.
Yeah. Like the biggest thing in this film, or one of the scenes that you take away is where the boy's talking about he has a dog, like a pet dog. and his dad, for whatever reason, comes home one day in a bad mood and shoots the dog.
Oh.
He's like, he shot my fucking dog. He shot my fucking dog. And you can see how it's no wonder that this lad is it Charlie? Hang on, I've got to check me. Yeah, Charlie Creed Miles. It's no wonder the lad that he plays grows up a raving, addicted to heroin.
Oh yeah,
that's his role model. Yeah, quite. It's called Kneel by Mouth because in the end, the Ray Winston character, who's this big, tough, guy, he's not afraid of no one, and he's finally like breaking down, and it's all coming to a head. He talks about his dad. And he said, my dad never hugged me as a kid. My dad never done this. All he did was sit in his chair and drink, and you couldn't interrupt him. And he said, and he's like pointing out the irony that when his dad died in hospital, and he's kind of, you can lift him off the bed with two fingers, kind of thing. That the sign above the bed said, "Kneel by mouth," and he was like, so his dad, the irony that his dad had drunk himself to death, but on his deathbed it says "kneel by mouth." That's why that film's called, cool.
I might give that a look. Who's the director?
I think it's Gary Oldman.
Okay.
Yeah, they've all done some good stuff. Those guys, they've done Britain proud, really, in the film stakes. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely give that a look then. I do like the films, but there's not that many. They're kind of made a bit differently nowadays, aren't they, films? Like, I tend to go back to
they're all shit.
Yeah, frankly, yeah.
They're all
too much CGI and
too much CGI. It's always some fantasy angle. Can't just tell a real good story. Midnight Express.
I mean, Oliver Stone stuff was always good, Oliver Stone. But I mean, he did TV. He's done a bit of TV. He seems to have retired now. But a lot of old good directors and actors have just stepped back, it seems. This age of CGI.
Oliver Stone, wasn't he? Didn't he do Platoon?
He did Scarface. We did Platoon. We did Scarface, didn't he? Most famously.
Yeah, Midnight Express was written by Oliver Stone, based on the Billy Hayes story. Yeah, I like all that. I don't need bells and whistles on my films. I just want to see a good story.
Yeah, you want it to be believable, authentic, and
I don't need CGI. I don't need phasing back and forth between sci-fi genre or or whatever. But yes, Jace, listen, this has been absolutely wonderful chat, mate. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I found it fascinating.
Okay, then. Should have a book.
Yeah, get your book up.
Oh, there's the book. So it's The Old Man and Me. You get it Amazon. You get it from Manny Waterstones.
Hold it up again. So, there we go. Look, there you go, folks. Look, The Old Man and Me, Jason Wilson, A Gangster's Life, A Son's Journey. We'll put a link below the podcast, folks, so you can grab yourself a copy. Have you got social media, Jace? People want to get hold of you?
I do. I'm on Twitter at The Old Man and Me. So that's the main thing I do. Instagram, I don't do a great deal, but Twitter, I'm always doing Twitter. There should be plenty more stuff coming out as well.
I'm just making a note of that. Yes, brilliant. Brother, listen, I wish you all the best. Just one last question. Did you ever have to do any time? No, I was very... I did a combination of listening to what my dad says, a lot of luck. I suppose there was a lot of luck involved, but a lot of it's just... I suppose I built up the experience by working with him. So I think when they got raided in 2000, I buggered off to Thailand because I could see it coming. And then I did get it. There were warrants out for me then. I got arrested in Spain, but bounced through that, fortunately. And then I had the sense to withdraw because I think seeing how much time the old man had done, it was like, you just don't want to go there, really. Yeah.
So, and it was that lack of ego thing where you think, well, I'd rather have a happy family than have a load of money and be inside. And it's
Exactly.
it makes sense. All the kind of the best things in life are kind of free in a way. You only need so much money. You don't need more
I could be quite happy living in a garden shed. I wouldn't give a shit, you know, as long as I have my freedom. Just doesn't matter to me, you know.
And I think that's the thing. Seeing your dad who hasn't got his freedom means you want to keep yours, and you don't want to take silly risk and risk losing everything for what? Just for a bit more money. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that steered me through anyway. Lack of ego.
Jay, stay on the line so I can thank you properly. But for the purposes of the recording, which I shouldn't say that on a criminal podcast, should I? But for the purposes of the tape, massive thank you, mate. Massive thank you.
All right, then.
Friends, we're going to put a link for Jace's book below, so please grab yourself a copy. Just to say much love to you all. Please look after yourselves. If you can chuck us a like and a subscribe on the video and hit the notification bell, that's all going to help. And stay free, and we'll see you next time.